I don't know what you're going to find harder to believe, Trump's poll numbers or who's reporting them. Because while the legacy media and a small but very loud roster of turncoat podcasters has spent the last 3 weeks telling us that MAGA's finished, that the base has abandoned Trump over the Iran war, CNN, of all places, just nuked that narrative to smithereens. And that's just the beginning, because the SAVE Act just cleared its first Senate hurdle. The Democrats are being dragged onto the floor to defend the indefensible, and the numbers tell a story the left absolutely does not want you to hear. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, celebrating yet another glorious day in the Trumpian golden age that you made possible back in November of 2024. So if you want a front row seat on how you continue to change the world in ways you never even imagined, you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Ever since Operation Epic Fury began just over 2 weeks ago, we've been told by both the legacy media and a very small number of right-wing podcasters that MAGA is finished. MAGA died with Trump betraying his populist base after he was bewitched by Bibi Netanyahu to do the bidding of Israel and fight Israel's war. Now, make no mistake, the legacy media is absolutely loving this. They adore watching MAGA, or I guess now officially post-MAGA influencers, ripping on Trump. Joe Kent, case in point, was once considered by this very same legacy media to be a far-right lunatic who hung around white supremacists. Now he's their darling. Now that he's turned on Trump, he is the new official darling of the left. As Senator John Fetterman has said, the left has no principles other than TDS, their absolute rabid hatred of Trump. And they are welcoming, with arms wide open, the rebellion of these now anti-Trump post-MAGA podcasters. And they're framing that rebellion as indicative of a wider rebellion among Trump's base. In other words, the legacy media is pushing this notion that the podcasters speak for the people. Not Trump, no, the podcasters. They are the true voice of the MAGA base that Trump has officially betrayed after being spellbound by the evil Bibi Netanyahu. That's the narrative that both the legacy media and these MAGA turncoats are spinning. And who on earth would ever have believed, again, reality is better than fiction, right? Who would ever have even conceived that the one place of sanity in the midst of all this, the one place that literally blew apart in one single strike that entire narrative, could possibly be CNN?
And this is one of those, because just take a look here. MAGA GOP view of Trump. Approve 100%. 100%. If you are a member of MAGA in the GOP, you approve of Donald John Trump. 0% say that they disapprove. You don't have to be a mathematical genius to know you can't go higher than 100%. He is the 1972 Miami Dolphins. Now, there are some Republicans who disapprove of Donald John Trump, but they are not members of the Make America Great Again movement. The bottom line is this: if you are a member of MAGA, you approve of Donald Trump.
It's interesting, though, because there have been a couple prominent people who have sort of come out online, and they're very mad about this war with Iran because he promised no new wars. Is there any sign that people might be leaving MAGA relative to 2024?
Yeah, okay. So, I've said it before, and, the theme of this segment is Tucker Carlson be darned. And when we look at the numbers, I've heard some people say, oh, you know what, when you look at those MAGA numbers, it doesn't account for those who might have left MAGA. But take a look here. Americans who identify as MAGA, in November of 2024, it was 28% of Americans. Now it's basically the same. If anything, it's slightly higher at 30%. The bottom line is this: the MAGA base within the GOP is not shrinking. It's the same size. If anything, it is slightly larger than it was back in 2024 when, of course, Donald Trump won a second term. So that 100% that Donald Trump has approval among MAGA GOP, that is not an artifact of MAGA shrinking. It's just an indication of how strong Donald Trump's grip is on that MAGA base.
100 freaking percent. That would make Trump more popular than Kim Jong-un. Did you see that? Kim Jong-un was just reelected general secretary by North Korea's parliament with just 99.93% approval. So Trump is now technically more popular than the otherwise single most popular politician on the planet, if we're going by percentages of support, of course, and of course the major difference being that no gun is being held to MAGA heads. But seriously, I mean, what on earth do you say to that? By the way, that was an NBC poll that Harry Enton was referring to there. But what do you say to that? 0% disapproval. It's not just NBC. Fox News polling, which tends to lean left, they have Trump at a nearly identical 98% approval among self-identified MAGA loyalists. Or take the latest YouGov. In terms of the war itself, 91% of self-identified MAGA voters approve of epic fury. There's no controversy here. None. Zippo. 100%, 98%, 91%. And MAGA's growing to boot, as you saw with Harry Enton talking about there. More people identify as MAGA supporters today than they did back in 2024. So again, what do you say to that? Well, unfortunately, I think we are seeing something akin to what the Portuguese scholar Bruno Maçães would call virtualism. And he makes the extended argument that America, in particular, is prone to, or it's evolved into a kind of virtual society where politics and culture increasingly take place inside constructed virtual worlds rather than in what I would call visceral reality, right? Shared, stubborn, empirical reality. And what Maçães argues is that American life, in terms of it being so much online, being consumed in a virtual universe, as it were, it tends to lean into make-believe, where people choose the story world, the narrative arc they want to inhabit, and then they treat it as more real than the actual facts on the ground. And I would argue, from what I can see, that is exactly what we are seeing, generally speaking, with these turncoat influencers. When CNN of all places, is forced to admit that Trump is more popular with his MAGA base than any other president, Republican or Democrat, ever have been with their own base, that's not a talking point from a MAGA account. This is NBC polling data presented on one of the most anti-Trump networks in America. So all I can say here is that these turncoat podcasters, these online so-called influencers, are frankly not operating in the real world. They're inhabiting a Maçães-style virtualist political universe, a VR political universe, a self-contained narrative ecosystem turbocharged by Telegram channels and online rabbit holes where a preferred storyline has become their primary reality. The polls don't lie, the base is not fracturing, and no amount of virtualist storytelling changes that. All right, so that said, we've got another big story that we're following, the SAVE Act in the Senate. We've got some big developments that you're not going to want to miss. Speaking of a hybrid approach, if you love books and are looking for some ways of making extra cash from the comfort of your own laptop, do I have something for you? What if I told you that there's a little-known arbitrage play hiding inside a $30 billion market. You heard that right, 30 billion with a B, and regular people with zero background in finance or tech are quietly generating $5,000, $10,000, or even $20,000 a month from it, using nothing but a laptop. I know it sounds almost too good to be true, but it is. Here's what's actually going on. There's a significant and very real pricing gap in the used book market. The same book can be worth dramatically different amounts depending on where it's listed. And the people who've learned how to spot and exploit that gap are building serious, sustainable income. And what makes this unlike anything else that I've ever come across, you never actually handle a single physical book. No inventory sitting in your garage, no trips to the post office, no physical logistics whatsoever. The whole thing runs from your browser. You identify the opportunity, you make a few clicks, and the fulfillment side is handled entirely by someone else. And I want to be clear, this isn't a side hustle that just pads your grocery budget. This is a real business model that people are running full time right now. Many of them have walked away from their jobs they certainly didn't want to spend the rest of their lives doing. That's why I'm personally hosting a free live training where I'm going to walk you through exactly how this system works, start to finish. No filler, no theory, just the actual mechanics of how to find the opportunities and what to do with them. I've gone deep on this, gang, and I am genuinely excited to show you what I found. Hit the link below or scan the QR code on your screen to grab your free spot right now. This is definitely one you want to show up for. Click on that link below right now. The SAVE Act, President Trump's #1 legislative priority, which would require proof of citizenship and photo ID to vote in federal elections, has just officially cleared its first major Senate hurdle, with Republicans voting 51-48 to open formal floor debate, a vote that fell almost entirely along party lines, with only Senator Lisa Murkowski, the embarrassment from Alaska, Trump plus 13 state. She, in her typical Jezebel fashion, broke ranks and voted with her fellow swamp rat Democrats, as she normally does. Senator Tom Tillis, the retiring Republican from North Carolina, didn't show up to vote at all. He was too busy pouting under his desk. Even Mitch McConnell, in the end, voted to open formal debate. With that procedural threshold cleared, Senate Republicans have now launched what Majority Leader John Thune is calling a full-scale floor takeover. They're promising marathon sessions that could stretch for a week or longer, forcing Democrats to show up, defend their opposition, and go on record against a bill that polls show anywhere from 80 to 80% of Americans, including a majority of Democrats, actually support. It is probably the SAVE Act is probably the single most popular piece of legislation out there. Now, the strategy championed loudly by Senator Mike Lee and Ted Cruz is to make this a public spectacle, to drag Democrats onto the Senate floor night after night, make them justify to their constituents why they're blocking a common sense voter ID requirement, and build the political pressure heading into the midterms. Now, unfortunately, because this is not a formalized talking filibuster, there is a catch to all of this, and that is that when the debate does finally end, however it ends, Republicans are still going to have to come up with 60 votes to invoke cloture and pass the bill. So that's a threshold they're not even close to reaching at this point. In the old system, you could filibuster, but each senator from your party was only allowed to speak twice. And so there was a built-in terminus to the debate. And once every senator in the opposition party spoke twice over the course of the entire continuous debate, often lasting weeks, then the debate came to an end, and you got to pass the bill with a simple majority. Now, without a talking filibuster, which, keep in mind, has been the case over the last several decades, we stopped the talking filibuster through a rule change back in 1975. But now you do have to vote to end the debate, and that's what's called cloture. And you need 60 votes to end the debate, to vote to end the debate early. in the Senate. So we don't even need to end the filibuster, to be honest with you. We just have to bring back the original one that our founding fathers intended that had a built-in terminus to it, which allowed for bills to finally get passed with a simple majority, not the ceremonial filibuster that has effectively shut down the Senate. But regardless, they are pushing Democrats, Republicans are, to make, ironically, asses of themselves. Get it? Donkeys. They are making asses of themselves and arguing against the bill that over 80% of the voting public supports in an effort to politically damage them. Then it looks as if they're going to try to pass it as a reconciliation bill, which only requires a simple majority. But reconciliation bills are generally specific to budgetary issues, right? The argument that senators like Louisiana's John Kennedy are making is that the SAVE Act does carry undeniable fiscal implications. So proof of citizenship requirements, they directly reduce the costs associated with federal benefits or welfare programs and public services flowing to ineligible non-citizens, which is precisely the kind of mandatory spending reform that qualifies under what's called the Byrd Rule, which requires that reconciliation provisions have to have a direct budgetary effect. Also, the president is fully on the Republican side in this. Republicans used reconciliation twice in recent years when they had control of the Senate to pass sweeping partisan legislation on party line votes. And with Senate Democrats now blocking both DHS funding and the SAVE Act through the filibuster, Republicans have explicitly declared that a reconciliation bill is indeed, well, as they say, the only train leaving the station for moving priority legislation that can't reach 60 votes. So again, with a bill that has 80% support among voters, including a majority of Democrats, who support the bill's core requirement that only citizens vote in American elections, this is a perfect bill for the Republicans to frame as simultaneously a vote for both election integrity and fiscal responsibility ahead of the November midterms, all the while forcing the Democrats to vote against it. So we'll most certainly be keeping a very close eye on how things turn out in the days ahead. But in the meantime, make sure you're calling your senators daily and putting the pressure on them to get this bill passed and put it on President Trump's desk. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments section below. And as always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button for breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. Love you guys. God bless.